When a ruthless woman uses a fake HOA to terrorize his family and steal his land, one rancher refuses to back down. Armed with nothing but grit and a camera, he fights back against a web of lies and corruption, turning the tables on those who thought they could destroy him. Imagine this. You're cooking out Sunday dinner when 3 bogus cops wearing Halloween badges burst onto your property, demanding to take your livestock and close down the ranch that sustained your family for 70 years. That's what happened to me. I'm Dalton Mitchell, and these crooked HOA enforcement agents were going to ruin all my grandfather worked hard to achieve until they made one deadly mistake. See, they didn't know my cousin Jake is the real sheriff of this county. The pungent aroma of mesquite smoke blended with the stench of diesel fuel from their sorry golf cart, and they waved laminated citations around and demanded that I pay $2,400 on the spot or see my cattle seized. These clowns had no idea they just signed on to declare war on the wrong family. What would you do if imposter authorities attempted to rob you of your life's work? And where are you observing from? Is your community infested with power-hungry, HOA psychos like mine? Let me go back and recount how this war began. My name's Dalton Mitchell, and I operate a 47-acre cattle ranch just outside of Millbrook County, Texas. This ranch has belonged in my family since 1952, when my grandfather purchased it with his GI Bill funds after spending 3 years in Korean foxholes. This is what was on the line. I'm recently divorced. My 2 teenage children come weekends, and this ranch isn't only my business, it's their heritage. I make $180K a year selling top-shelf Angus beef direct to consumers who actually care about quality. Lose the ranch? Lose everything. 5 years ago, paradise ended. Some developer built Sage Creek Estates right next door. McMansion starting at $400K with community pools and the kind of neighbors who call cops when roosters crow at dawn. They promised rural character preservation, which apparently meant keeping the pretty cow views while strangling the actual ranching. Then came Vivian Cromwell. Imagine a 52-year-old real estate barracuda from Dallas on a quest to raise housing prices in the sting of an IRS audit. Ever holding her leather portfolio like a club, riding around in a gleaming white Lexus allergic to mud, talking only in corporate jargon that makes your soul crawl. The first day she stormed my property, I heard her stilettos piercing my gravel driveway. Tight clicks, such as a countdown meter to adversity. Her fragrance struck me from 20 feet away. Some chemical flower bomb that made my cattle jumpy and my sinuses ache. It fought violently with the honest odors of hay, diesel, and yes, cow that make up honest work. "Mr. Mitchell," she declared, slamming a shiny violation notice into my hard-boiled hands like she was issuing a warrant. "Your operation is in serious violation of community standards. Get this. According to her fantasy legal document, my ranch falls under expanded HOA jurisdiction due to shared water rights." She'd written herself authority over my land through some bureaucratic word salad. My grandfather's 1987 Ford tractor, unsightly equipment, my cattle, inappropriate livestock odors. Hell, even my original 1950s barbed wire was somehow non-conforming. Materials. I kept cool, produced my property deeds, surveys, tax receipts. "Ma'am, my family's been here since prior to your subdivision even being a developer's wet dream." That's when her corporate smile became predatory. "Things change, Mr. Mitchell. Communities grow, those who can't grow along with them. Well, let's just say stubborn people tend to find themselves very, very uncomfortable. I'd hate to see you lose everything out of pride." The threat hit like ice water. This wasn't about compliance. This was extortion with a smile. Within 48 hours, she started, billing me $500 daily for every imaginary violation she could invent. $500 a day for the crime of ranching on ranch land. Do the math. That's $182,500 annually, more than my entire income. But here's where it gets really ugly. My realtor buddy called with a tip. "Dalton, someone has been bringing your property to developers. They are building something big." Vivian was not attempting to correct infractions. She was creating a crisis in order to steal my property. That evening, on my porch, observing my cattle graze during the sunset, something my grandpa said was ringing in my head. Son, bullies hope that good people are too exhausted to resist. The second you surrender is the second you lose everything. That counts. Vivian Cromwell had only just issued a declaration of war on the wrong clan. She'd believed she was working with some country hick who'd cave at the sight of some legal documents and threats. What she did not realize was that my family had been staking out this dirt for 70 years, and we'd figured a thing or two about scrapping dirty when we had to. The aroma of evening barbecue wafted from Sage Creek Estates as my cattle packed quietly in the distance. Two worlds set to impact. Game on, lady. 2 weeks later, she attempted what I can only call the world's worst military coup. She hired HOA Enforcement Solutions. 3 wannabes in poser police gear driving through my subdivision in beefed-up golf carts as if they were patrolling Fallujah rather than harassing cattle ranchers. The ringleader was Buck Hargrove, 38, ex-mall cop, current Napoleon complex, with a badge. His navy polyester uniform creaked with every step and made him sweat as though he'd run the marathon in Death Valley. His nervous sweat combined with cheap cologne produced this wonderfully terrible cloud that followed him everywhere. Tuesday morning, I'm setting fence posts when this abject, whirring noise comes along. Buck's golf cart rattled up my driveway, amber lights blinking as if he were rushing to a nuclear meltdown rather than disturbing a fellow with a shovel. "Sir, move away from that gear right now," Buck declared, hoisting himself out of his cart with all the gravitas of a hall monitor. Cracking up. My cattle congregated at the fence line, observing this show with what I'm certain was boyne amusement. Even my cows realized this was absurd. "Agricultural violation charge, 47B, Buck went on, reading from a laminated card like it was the Constitution. "Unsanctioned fence alteration, without HOA permission. You have 15 minutes to shut down and pay $2,400, or we confiscate your livestock." That's when I saw his official badge up close for the first time. Plastic spray painted gold. The type of thing my children used to wear when they played cops and robbers, only my teens had more sense than to threaten grown-ups with Halloween accessories. As Buck read me the Riot Act on community cooperation procedures, I quietly Googled HOA enforcement remedies on my phone. The site was 3 weeks old and listed to Vivian's cousin's lawn care business. Their police certification was via a 39.99 online course that lasted 20 minutes. My brother-in-law got arrested years ago for wearing his security guard uniform to a bar fight. The officers informed us that impersonating peace officers in Texas is punishable with up to a year in jail and $4,000 fines. These clowns were committing actual felonies under false pretenses, pretending to enforce fictional laws. Rather than confront Buck in person, never interrupt erring enemies. I commenced my counteroffensive, phone recording all, trail cameras set up around property boundary, precise time-stamped notes. If they wished to play dress-up, I'd record every absurd moment. That afternoon, I went canvassing Sage Creek residents, found Vivian billing the HOA $50,000 per year for professional security services that involved 3 fellows in golf carts, doing nothing but making neighbors look dumb for paying. Mrs. Henderson, 81-year-old retired schoolteacher, caught me after a meeting at her mailbox. That woman's billing us for security that does not exist while frightening our neighbors. Some of us are tired of her bull. The following morning, Buck took it to full-on comedy. He showed up with a real chain, intending to tow my 1987 Ford tractor in under its owner by chaining it to his golf cart. Simple physics should have cautioned him. 2000 lb tractor against glorified lawn mower that had delusions of grandeur. I sat on my porch and watched as Buck wrapped chain around the axle of my tractor and then chained it to his cart's trailer hitch. The instant he pressed accelerator, Newton's laws were in control. Chain snapped tight. Golf cart's rear took off the ground like a seesaw, and Buck went flying backward into a newly prepared mud puddle by my cattle. The crunch of Buck's landing, half splash, half squish, reverberated across my farm. I've witnessed newborn calves with more balance than this mall cop wallowing in cow-enriched Texas mud. Polyester uniform absorbing nature's fertilizer like an expensive sponge. 20 minutes later, Vivian's spotless Lexus pulled up for damage repair. She wouldn't get out of her driver's seat, not willing to risk designer shoes in real dirt while attempting to stage Buck's rescue over the cell phone. "This isn't over, Mitchell," she yelled out her cracked window. "We have connections, individuals who will cause your life extremely difficult." "Can't wait to meet them," I yelled back, continuing to tape every line. The diesel fuel and mud odor slowly dissipated as dusk drew near, giving way to known smells of hay and cattle bedding down for the night. Buck's uniform was most likely still drying somewhere, and Vivian's threats were becoming more detailed. But here's what she didn't realize. Each threat, each bogus citation, each absurd attempt at enforcement was making my case. Harassment, impersonation, and fraud in Texas are not civil violations. They are criminal ones. And I was keeping a record of it. Time to take things up a notch. Week 3 rolled out Vivian's nuclear option, using the full power of the federal government against me. If she'd directed this kind of creativity toward honest business, she might have succeeded. Instead, she resolved to make my ranch ground zero for bureaucratic combat. Monday morning detonated with a knock that shook my windows. County health inspector appeared there looking truly sorry, clipboard shaking in his hands. "Mr. Mitchell, I must investigate complaints of illegal slaughter operations polluting local water supply." Illegal. What now? The complaint form made my blood boil, typed on official HOA letterhead, signed by concerned citizens for public safety, complete with detailed allegations about unsanitary meat processing and groundwater contamination. Pure fiction written in Vivian's distinctive corporate buzzword style. Before noon, EPA water quality team with testing equipment worth more than my truck. By afternoon, immigration agents demanding worker documentation for employees who didn't exist. The pungent aroma of government disinfectant coupled with diesel smoke from their trucks helped create this singly stifling environment that spooked my cattle. My kitchen table was buried under a landslide of official documents. That silky smooth government paper carrying the threat of destruction. Department of Agriculture requested vaccination certificates. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality requested water use reports. Every document had been like another shovelful of earth on my family's tomb. That night, while answering my 7th compliance interview call, something snapped. I began investigating Vivian's modus operandi rather than just responding to it. What I learned made my hands tremble in fury. She'd used this same script on 3 other farm families in rural areas. Mrs. Peterson lost her horse farm after 18 months of bogus infractions. The Garcias sold their vegetable business when EPA fines reached $30,000 for contamination that testing confirmed never occurred. Same grievances, same regulators, same result. Coerced sales to Vivian at less than market price. This is where I wised up rather than getting angry. I sent Freedom of Information requests on all the complaints against my property. The results revealed Vivian's deadly error. The same words on several bogus reports, all filed on the same day, all penned with her signature corporate speak no actual citizen would ever use. In Texas, submitting false government reports isn't harassment. It's aggravated perjury, a third-degree felony punishable by 2 to 10 years' time. Vivian had been committing felonies under the cover of government bureaucracy. Tuesday brought my first true ally and the day's greatest surprise. Constance Winters showed up at my door. 61-year-old retired paralegal whose land abutted Sage Creek, with a manila folder as thick as a dictionary. "Mr. Mitchell, I've been recording what they're doing to you," she stated, parking herself in my kitchen chair with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years operating within legal systems. "I believe we can bury them," Constance had learned Vivian's hook, employing HOA letterhead to submit formal complaints and invoke emergency health hazard authority. This provided her with spurious credentials, with government agencies legally obligated to investigate every complaint, no matter how absurd. "She is not merely harassing us," Constance continued, scattering documents across my table. "She is billing taxpayers for fraud. Each bogus investigation costs thousands in government dollars, and then the bombshell that turned everything around. On the third visit from the health inspector in 6 months, he took me aside conspiratorially. Mr. Mitchell, I shouldn't be telling you this, but these complaints are clearly staged. Same individual, same timing, same bogus claims. Can you show it?" He looked around frantically. "Verify the filing times, all submitted within minutes of one another, always Monday morning at precisely 8:47 a.m. Such as a person creating calendar reminders to make false reports. Later that day, my daughter called at school, trembling. "Dad, kids are telling me FBI agents come to our house all the time. Are you a criminal?" The question was a blow to the body. Vivian wasn't just going after my business. She was attacking the sense of security of my children and their belief in their father. The comfortable weight of parent guilt combined with fiery anger in my chest. But rather than call out Vivian to her face, I made a tactical choice that would later prove invaluable. I began to feed her ego, allowing her to believe that she was gaining the upper hand while I videotaped and photographed every offense she committed. Constance recommended bringing in her nephew Marcus, an attorney who deals with HOA fraud. But "We require irrefutable evidence first," she cautioned. "One angry homeowner appears like bitter grapes. Several victims with documented criminal conspiracy appears like structured crime." That weekend, sitting on my porch watching another government inspection crew crawl around my property, I realized something significant. Vivian's aggressive posturing exposed desperation, not power. She was frantic, erring, leaving evidence in her wake. The scent of weekend barbecue wafted from Sage Creek Estates while my phone rang with another compliance question. But now every call was different. No more threats, but building blocks for justice. Time to make Hunter become hunted. Week 4 introduced Vivian's masterpiece, a complete media assassination aimed at killing me on live TV. She'd scheduled an emergency community gathering asserting my ranch was threatening immediate public health crisis, complete with press releases that would make CNN envious. The community center was abuzz with staged alarm as locals grasped printed copies of emails regarding agricultural contamination crisis. Vivian had gone overboard with the propaganda. Doctored pictures of my cows wreaking havoc on children, in fact neighbor Johnson's horses, poisoned water samples, muddy rain puddles, and assault weapons. My otherwise normal farm tools staged with dramatic lighting. The rumble of helicopter. Rotors signaled Channel 7 News arriving as if it were reporting on a natural disaster. I observed their crew prep for what they obviously thought would be environmental Chernobyl from my kitchen window. The metallic flavor of adrenaline blending with coffee when I knew Vivian was going to shame me statewide. Her production was perfect. Crisp, white blazer, worried face, standing safely behind her Lexus, gesturing towards my hazardous operation like a war correspondent. The acting was worthy of an Emmy. The public's safety is being completely disregarded by this man's reckless behavior, she informed cameras. Tone expertly balanced between authority and victimhood. We've recorded contamination, hostile behavior, and now he's threatening legal action for families safeguarding their children. What she was not aware of, my trail cameras had documented, her crew setting up each piece of evidence she was introducing. As she did her theatrics for the press, I had HD recordings of her crew hauling my cattle panels to make them appear broken, spreading manure along property lines prior to photographs, even disposing of motor oil in puddles to act as contamination. Then there was her killing mistake. We had been compelled to pursue emergency power to take this perilous property in the interest of community safety, Vivian declared to the journalist with theatrics. My blood ran cold. No HOA has seizure power. That's purely government authority by way of eminent domain. She'd just defrauded live television by posing as public officials. The reporter pushed on. What statutory power does your group have to seize property? The Sage Creek Emergency Protection Act gives us sweeping enforcement authority in times of public health emergencies, Vivian answered firmly, waving what appeared to be an official document. I almost spat out my coffee. There is no such legislation as the Sage Creek Emergency Protection Act. She'd actually made up imaginary laws on live television. This circus went on while my phone rang with the call that altered the course of our lives. Constance's voice was trembling with excitement. Dalton, I've been researching Sage Creek's legal status. The HOA was never legitimately incorporated with the county. Their whole organization is a scam. What does that make it legally? Every fee they took, every fine they wrote, every enforcement action for the last 5 years is criminal theft. Vivens. Been operating a sophisticated game of 3-card Monty. The proof was brutal. No articles of incorporation, no registered bylaws, no legal status at all. Vivian had been taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees from an organization that was only a letterhead reality and a figment of her imagination. That is when the neighborhood backlash began. 3 residents of Sage Creek showed up at my doorstep looking embarrassed and angry. Tom Bradley, former firefighter, represented them. Mitchell, we gotta apologize. Half the neighborhood's fed up with Vivian's psychodrama. Our fees have tripled. She's harassing other neighbors, and now she's bringing news teams into our lives. Sarah Morgan, nurse practitioner included, she interrogated my teenage daughter about your suspicious nighttime activity. That's when I knew this woman's lost her damn mind. But Vivian's psychological warfare had its effect. She'd begun to stalk my property at odd hours, parking just beyond the fence line, and gawking at my house like some crazy ex-girlfriend. The harassment was intensifying past property issues into outright stalking activity. The final straw was when my ex-wife phoned, spoken strangled with coached concern. Dalton, I've been seeing the news. Perhaps it's for the best if the kids stay away this weekend until your legal issues are resolved. What legal issues? I haven't been arrested on anything. The lady on the news reported several agencies are investigating you. I couldn't jeopardize the children's safety amidst all this turmoil. That 10-minute rant almost shattered me. Vivian's manipulation of the media was paying off. She was exploiting my own kids against me through created fear and hijacked authority. But instead of going ballistic, I made the strategic move that would conclude the war. As Vivian enjoyed her media win, I was recording each of the lies she uttered on camera, each of the forged documents she exhibited, each of the illegal threats she issued. My sister phoned that night from Austin. With our stress call, she let fall the hint I'd been too arrogant to entertain. Jake's been inquiring about you ever since he watched the news coverage. Maybe it's time to phone your cousin. Jake Mitchell, sheriff of Millbrook County. We hadn't communicated since the funeral of Dad on account of some idiotic family feud I had no recollection of. As helicopters flew overhead like vultures and diesel fumes blended with evening hay, I knew this was no longer about pride. This was about preventing a criminal from ruining more families. Time to pull out the nuclear option. Thursday morning dawned with the revelation that turned this whole war around. As I dug into property records on Marcus, I came across the deed. That would make Vivian's venture a dead letter. A 1952 water rights easement with wording so definitive it could have been engraved in neon. Farming properties shall forever be exempt from any future restrictions on residential development or homeowner association rule in perpetuity. My grandfather hadn't simply purchased land. He'd beaten future land snatchers by 70 years. Vivian's whole expanded jurisdiction rested on fake documents. But that was the appetizer. The main course caused my coffee cup to slip from shaking hands. County tax rolls revealed Vivian had been paying property taxes on my 47 acres for 3 years, asserting ownership by adverse possession under HOA management authority. She wasn't bothering me. She was appropriating my land. one bureaucratic form at a time. The financial paper trail only disclosed outright criminal enterprise. Vivin had extorted $127,000 in assessment fees from properties never subject to lawful HOA jurisdiction. She'd been operating a protection racket masquerading as community management on rural families who couldn't afford to resist. Then Marcus phoned with the revelation that turned the whole thing upside down. Dalton. I've been cross-matching her victims with recent real estate sales. Each family she'd bullied sold in 18 months, all to the same development firm. She wasn't merely stealing fees, she was forcing sales for enormous land speculation gains. The scale was enormous. Vivin's scheme had run up more than $3 million worth of bogus property purchases in 3 counties. This was not neighborhood soap opera. This was extortion. That afternoon delivered the family talk I had been dreading for 3 years. My sister phoned with information that had my chest constricted. Jake is aware of what's going on with you. He's been secretly looking into allegations of bogus law enforcement officers in his jurisdiction. Jake Mitchell, my cousin, sheriff of Millbrook County, ex-Texas Ranger, and the one I'd been too arrogant to call since our idiotic fight at Dad's funeral. We'd argued over who got his hunting rifle. Sounds absurd now, but pride runs deep in Texas soil. He made a point of inquiring. "About you yesterday," she went on, "told him he's been reading up on police impersonation scams aimed at ranchers. Dalton, he's worried." The reality of it slammed into me like a punch. While I had been reporting crime and constructing cases, Jake had been probing the same criminal enterprise on his side. We'd been fighting the same battle on opposite sides, divided only by obdurate pride. "I don't get to call asking for favors," I complained weakly. "This isn't about favors." Jake swore to defend citizens from precisely this sort of predator. "Vivin's not just bothering you. She's operating organized crime in his county." That night, going over my evidence in the darkness as cattle bedded for the night, the ethical calculus came into sharp focus. Each folder held as many felonies as would put Vivin away for decades. Fraud, theft, impersonation, filing false reports, attempted theft of property, conspiracy. The issue wasn't whether she'd done wrong. It was how many families she'd ruin, while I remained obstinate. Constance had found 11 families in active assault. 3 had already sold and lost family land for generations. 2 were headed for bankruptcy from the cost of compliance. One couple was planning on suicide instead of losing their farm. My pride was facilitating a predator. Marcus had the legal strategy prepared. Present Vivin with overwhelming proof. Insist on total cessation and full repayment, or risk instant criminal prosecution. But having sheriff backing meant instant justice instead of years of court battles, as the smell of evening hay mixed with distant diesel fumes. I made the decision that would end this war and maybe repair something more important than property lines. Time to call my cousin and finish this fight properly. Friday morning, I swallowed 3 years of hard-headed pride and called the number that I should have called weeks earlier. My hands trembled as if I were confessing murder rather than inquiring from family how to fight real criminals. "Dalton?" Jake's tone had surprise and relief combined. "Damn, cousin. I was wondering when you'd call Jake. I messed up. I should have called you sooner about what's going on. You mean the corrupt law enforcement scam intimidating ranchers in my county?" Steele substituted steel for warmth in his tone. "I've been looking into complaints regarding bogus badges and unlawful citations for 2 months. Ironically, your name continued to emerge as the first suspect. That was a 2-hour conversation that mended 3 years of family grievances. Jake had been constructing his own case on the law enforcement front, following up on impersonation complaints, looking into suspect property transactions, recording misuses of government assets. We'd been bickering the same war from our respective trenches while our dumb pride remained the bulwark separating us. "Bring me all you have," he said at last. "If you're correct on scope, we're talking about organized criminal enterprise that could put people in prison for decades." Monday's war room at Marcus' law office felt like making plans for D-Day. The conference table was overwhelmed with evidence that resembled prosecuting organized crime. 5 years of recorded fraud, 847. Photos, 23 hours of video, financial records documenting systematic swiping over 3 counties. The aroma of fresh coffee blending with the pungent smell of toner from hundreds of copied reports as Marcus unfolded our plan with methodical precision. We're hitting from 4 angles at once. Criminal fraud and impersonation charges, civil, suit for damages and theft, administrative complaints for engaging in unlicensed real estate activities, and publicity to deter additional victims. Jake studied evidence with the deliberate ferocity that had made him legendary as a Texas Ranger. When he was done, his weathered face was granite hard. This is the most high-tech property theft operation I've seen in 15 years. She had operated a goddamn criminal empire in the guise of community management. The monetary carnage was ghastly. $127,000 pilfered in illegal fees, $47,000 in created compliance expenses, $89,000 in lost business revenue, and punitive damages for reckless malicious actions. Conservative estimate of liability was over $400,000, enough to put Vivin out of business and send unmistakable messages to other wannabe property thieves. Constance had mobilized 10 victimized households, turning personal revenge into community. Justice movement. Mrs. Patterson, whose late husband acquired his ranch with Korean War disability benefits. The Rodriguez family, whose vegetable farm supplied half the county before Vivian's harassment crippled their customer base. Every tale fueled our righteous indignation. Marcus imparted valuable legal information most individuals never acquire. When confronted with HOA disputes, immediately request incorporation papers and jurisdiction maps from county clerk. Legitimate organizations have these available within days. Scam operations make up excuses, stall, or outright refuse. That one request might save families thousands of dollars in unlawful fees and years of abuse. Jake provided street smarts. Anyone can order phony badges on the web for $20. But impersonating peace officers has heavy prison time in Texas. Always ask for genuine law enforcement identification with badge numbers that you can check. True cops never deny making this request. Trail cameras used for hunting also function beautifully to record property harassment. Cellular versions send proof automatically to accepted court's cloud storage. Our technical preparation was thorough. Professional security cameras replaced my amateur phone tapes, providing broadcast-quality proof that would annihilate any courtroom. Marcus introduced us to investigative journalist Sarah Williams, whose HOA corruption expose stories had prompted. Legislative reforms statewide. The psychological coaching was also vitally important. Constance, with 40 years of experience under the law, instilled emotional self-control in me. Bullies crave explosive outbursts they can turn against you. Remain calm. Document everything. Allow facts to demolish them rather than provide them with ammo to blame the victim. Alliance Construction uncovered hidden support. 3 county commissioners had fielded dozens of constituent complaints about Vivin's business. State Representative's office was working on legislation to shield agricultural properties from HOA abuse. Even government agencies were looking into her wholesale misuse of government resources. Jake set our timeline in military fashion. 30-day ultimatum calling for total stoppage and total recompense. She cooperates or is prosecuted criminally immediately. No compromise, no second chance, no tolerance for predators. But personal motive prevented this from being strictly tactical. Vivin was also terrorizing Mrs. Henderson, an 81-year-old Gold Star War widow whose husband had been killed in Vietnam. She was shaking down $300 a month from a single mother whose teenage son she'd wrongly accused of gang activity for wearing basketball shirts. These weren't disputes over property. These were harassments of vulnerable families who did not have lawyers. The night before our deadline, Jake and I sat on my porch drinking bourbon and watching cattle find their evening's grazing spot. The chaos. Familiar rumblings of lowing blended with the sounds of faraway highway traffic as 3 years of obstinate silence finally broke. "Should have called you earlier," I said. "Should have contacted me myself," he answered. "Family's worth more than pride. Tomorrow we'd give Vivian a single opportunity at submission. Beyond that, we'd bring everything we had to bear." Justice was at hand. Tuesday morning dawned with Vivian's most aggressive outburst to date, dropping all guys and unleashing a campaign of outright terror. Feeling as if the walls were coming down, she determined if she couldn't steal my property legally, she'd destroy it by sabotage and terror tactics. Dawn broke with the first attack. My cattle water tanks had been shot full of holes overnight, making muddy catastrophes that would take days to fix. But worse than destruction of property was the attempted killing of my animals. Someone had poured motor oil and anti-rees into the last clean water they had left, enough poison to kill every single one of my animals on the ranch. The acrid scent of pierced steel combined with the nauseating chemical odor of poisoned water, as I made the horrifying realization of how close I'd come to losing everything. If my cows had ingested that poison prior to when I found it, 70 years of family heritage would have perished in a single night. My storage shed for feed was even more frightening. The lock had been superglued in place, then ventilation holes had been cut into it and gasoline poured inside, a fire hazard that could have consumed my whole operation while I slept. The pungent chemical odor stung my eyes and my cows nervous. But Vivian's worst error was thinking that my new security system was no big deal. The new cameras recorded everything in prosecutorial-grade HD. Buck Hargrove and his bogus enforcement crew trespassing at 2:47 a.m., clearly identifiable faces as they committed several felonies with criminal intent. "Gotcha, you crazy bastards," I whispered, observing Buck's clunky figure struggle with bolt cutters as his sidekick filled poison into my water tanks. The video was so well-defined that you could read the brand labels on their tools of destruction. Marcus had filed criminal charges in time for breakfast. Actual sheriff's deputies showed up that day after lunch, taking the investigation with lethal seriousness that occurs when criminals go after law enforcement families. Jake's reputation guaranteed this case got high priority treatment. But Vivian's panic reaction indicated total psychological collapse. She filed for a restraining order alleging I'd been stalking and menacing her with lethal farm machinery. Her petition featured doctored photos of me menacingly driving my tractor close to her property, routine ranch work distorted into proof of intimidation via expert photo editing. The hearing was a masterclass in choreographed perjury. Vivian presented 3 paid witnesses who swore under oath that I'd threatened to drive them down with equipment and poison their kids with animal feces. Complete fabrication, given Hollywood-quality acting. Judge Martinez seemed doubtful, but issued temporary protection subject to investigation. Leaving that courtroom was like being gut-punched. Vivian had managed to politicize the legal system, to brand me as the criminal menace, while she engaged in genuine crimes. Her campaign of terror in my community escalated at once. All residents of Sage Creek were sent threatening notices on spurious legal letterhead threatening criminal prosecution for criminal conspiracy with agricultural terrorists. The psychological manipulation was clever and potent. Mrs. Patterson, the 73-year-old Gold Star widow who had been standing behind me, got the most hateful letter stating that her late husband's military benefits could be taken away for restitution if she kept facilitating property terrorism. The inhumanity was astounding. Then Vivian went over the line that made this personal. She targeted my children personally. My ex-wife phoned in tears after receiving safety issues from so-called CPS investigators, warning of toxic agricultural exposure on my ranch. "Dalton, I won't allow the children to come over with you under investigation for endangering children," she cried. "They told her you're exposing children to polluted water and toxic chemicals." "What pollution? What chemicals? Those are not true." The woman had official paperwork. She had information about the children's school, their medical history. How did she manage to pretend that? That 30-minute call almost destroyed me. Vivian was successfully kidnapping my children through institutional deception and psychological terrorism. The manipulation was so advanced that it deceived even individuals familiar with me. Thursday saw attempted bribery with overt threats. An intermediary introduced $150,000 in cash to me in exchange for my moving, quietly, and signed papers waiving future legal claims. When I wouldn't, the messenger read her ultimatum. "Accidents occur on ranches," he said bluntly. "Machinery malfunctions. Occasionally, stubborn individuals get injured when they refuse to heed reasonable proposals." But Friday introduced the twist that altered everything. Private investigator Ray Morrison, whom Vivian had retained to do opposition research, reached out to me personally with proof that would annihilate her. "Mr. Mitchell, I cannot do what she's asking," Morrison said, appearing legitimately troubled. He gave me a check Vivian had signed for $15,000 with evidence tampering in the memo line. "She is asking me to leave drugs on your property, make false domestic violence charges, forge fake financial crimes." That's not inquiry. That's felony, conspiracy. The recorded conversations Morrison provided were devastating. Vivian discussing permanently destroying Mitchell's credibility through planted evidence, fabricated charges, and manufactured scandals. She'd crossed from harassment into serious organized crime. Jake arrived within minutes of my call. After reviewing Morrison's evidence and recordings, his expression was pure predator. "She just handed us enough felonies to put her away for 20 years. Time to end this." That night, as Jake's patrol car made security rounds and the familiar sounds of cattle mixed with evening wind, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Certainty that justice was coming. Vivian had finally destroyed herself. Monday morning brought Vivian's most diabolical escalation. A full-scale psychological warfare campaign designed to turn my entire community into weapons against me. If she couldn't steal my property quietly, she'd orchestrate my public destruction through manufactured crisis. She organized an emergency community safety summit at the high school auditorium, sending official-looking invitations to county commissioners, state representatives, media outlets, and federal agencies. The theme: agricultural terrorism threatening public safety. Immediate government intervention required. Her preparation was breathtakingly evil. Professional PowerPoint presentation with aerial photos of my ranch marked as contamination zones. Fabricated CDC reports claiming livestock disease outbreak, and testimonials from paid actors posing as medical professionals warning about imminent public health catastrophe. But her masterpiece was the staged incident that nearly destroyed me. Sunday night, Vivian's crew orchestrated a fake cattle break-in at an expensive Sage Creek home, causing $12,000 in property damage while terrifying elderly residents who genuinely believed they were under attack. The sound of splintering wood and terrified screaming filled the night as confused cattle trampled through manicured gardens while homeowners called 911, believing they were experiencing home invasion. My heart broke watching my gentle animals used as weapons in someone else's criminal scheme. News crews arrived suspiciously fast, clearly coordinated response. Vivian performed for cameras with Oscar-worthy grief, holding pictures of damaged property while standing next to traumatized, elderly victims. "These beautiful people have lived here peacefully for years," she sobbed convincingly. "Now they're afraid to sleep in their own homes because one man refuses to control his dangerous animals." The media coverage was devastating. Rogue cattle terrorize. Elderly residents. Ranch owners' negligence threatens community. Dangerous livestock operations spark safety crisis. Each headline drove daggers deeper into my reputation and livelihood. My phone exploded with death threats from strangers. "Control your animals or we'll control you." "Terrorist rancher should be in prison." "Someone should burn down your operation." The venom was overwhelming and constant, but worse than stranger hatred was community isolation. Neighbors who'd known me for years suddenly crossed streets to avoid conversation. Local businesses refused my calls. Even my feed supplier demanded cash payment up front, claiming insurance liability concerns. Tuesday brought the most vicious, personal attack yet. Vivian contacted my children's school, claiming I was under federal investigation for bioterrorism and might pose danger to students during pickup. The humiliation of explaining to my teenagers why their classmates were asking if their dad was a terrorist nearly broke me completely. Wednesday escalated to financial warfare. Anonymous complaints flooded my business customers claiming health department had shut down my operation for contamination violations. 3 major restaurant contracts canceled within hours, costing me $40,000 in immediate income. My insurance company called demanding emergency property inspection after receiving multiple reports of dangerous conditions requiring immediate policy cancellation. Banking relationships became strained as loan officers questioned reputational risk from continuing business with controversial agricultural operations. The psychological pressure was crushing. Vivian's campaign had successfully isolated me from community, customers, family, and financial resources. Every day brought new fabricated crises requiring expensive responses that drained my savings while destroying my reputation. Thursday brought her most sophisticated attack, federal agency coordination. Simultaneous investigations launched by EPA, USDA, OSHA, and Homeland Security based on credible reports of agricultural bioterrorism activities. Each agency demanded immediate compliance inspections, costing thousands in consultant fees. The paperwork avalanche was intentionally overwhelming. Environmental impact assessments, biosecurity protocols, equipment certifications, worker safety compliance, bureaucratic requirements designed to bankrupt small operations through administrative costs alone. Friday's revelation nearly destroyed my sanity. My ex-wife called sobbing after receiving official notification that Child Protective Services was investigating me for exposing minors to biological hazards during weekend visits. The threat of losing my children was the final psychological weapon in Vivian's arsenal. They have medical reports claiming the kids were exposed to dangerous pathogens, she wept. Professional documentation about contamination risks. How can I fight government agencies with expert testimony? That conversation lasted an hour of manufactured terror overriding parental instinct. Vivian had successfully weaponized my own children against me using institutional fraud so sophisticated it fooled protective mothers. But while my world crumbled publicly, Jake had been working behind scenes. His investigation had uncovered connections to a larger criminal network operating across multiple counties. Vivian wasn't just targeting me. She was part of organized conspiracy stealing rural properties through systematic fraud. Saturday night, as I sat on my porch reviewing the week's devastation while police helicopters circled overhead and protesters gathered at my gate demanding my immediate removal, Jake called with news that made my hands shake. "Tomorrow's community meeting isn't just about your property anymore," he said grimly. "Federal investigators are attending. Vivian's about to discover that her criminal enterprise has attracted very serious attention from very serious people." The smell of diesel fumes mixed with evening hay as media trucks gathered like vultures for tomorrow's final confrontation. One way or another, this war was ending. Sunday morning felt like the world holding its breath. The high school auditorium overflowed with 400-plus people crammed into seats designed for 250, while media trucks formed a siege line in the parking lot. The air tasted electric with anticipation as reporters applied makeup and checked equipment for what everyone sensed would be explosive television. Commissioner Bradley's hands trembled as he called the emergency session to order. "We're here to address allegations regarding agricultural operations that allegedly pose imminent public safety threats." And Vivian commanded the stage like a prosecutor delivering death penalty closing arguments. Her presentation was Oscar-worthy. Professional slides displaying fabricated evidence, fake medical reports, and coached testimony designed to destroy me completely. For months, we've pleaded with one man to follow basic community standards, she declared, voice perfectly calibrated between authority and victimhood. But when elderly citizens are terrorized in their homes and children can't walk safely because of dangerous livestock, tolerance becomes criminal negligence. The crowd murmured angry agreement as she displayed horrifying photos from Sunday's staged cattle incident. Mrs. Morgan testified tearfully about being trapped in my bedroom while vicious animals destroyed my property and threatened my life. Her performance worthy of daytime television drama. This isn't about property rights, Vivian to crescendo. This is about protecting innocent families from agricultural terrorism. I formally demand immediate emergency seizure of this dangerous operation before someone dies. Commissioner Bradley nodded gravely. Based on overwhelming evidence of public endangerment, I'm authorized to order immediate commissioner. Before any official action, you need to see additional evidence. Jake's voice sliced through the auditorium like a cavalry charge, carrying 15 years of Texas Ranger authority that instantly transformed heated emotion into deadly, serious law enforcement business. 400 heads turned as he rose from the back, his presence changing everything. Sheriff Mitchell, do you have information relevant to these proceedings? Bradley asked, voice suddenly nervous. I have documentation of the most sophisticated criminal enterprise I've encountered in my career, Jake replied, walking down the center aisle while absolute silence followed his every step, including video evidence of every staged incident presented. Here tonight. The tension became suffocating as Jake connected his laptop to the projection system. The first video showed Buck Hargrove cutting my fence at 11:43 p.m. Sunday with criminal precision. The second revealed Vivian's crew using ATVs and air horns to terrorize confused cattle into Mrs. Morgan's yard while she waited safely in a hotel room they'd paid for. Ladies and gentlemen, every single piece of evidence presented tonight is either completely fabricated or deliberately staged, Jake announced as shocked gasps echoed through the crowd. You're witnessing organized criminal fraud designed to steal private property through psychological terrorism. Vivian's face drained to corpse white, but she tried desperately maintaining control. These are pathetic fabrications by criminals trying to avoid. Ma'am, you'll remain silent while evidence is presented, Jake commanded with voice that could stop traffic. The next exhibits annihilated her completely. Bank records revealing $340,000 embezzled from HOA accounts over 5 years. Recorded phone. Conversations exposing bribery attempts and conspiracy to plant illegal evidence. Federal documentation proving systematic targeting of rural families for forced property acquisition through organized fraud. This has nothing to do with community safety, Jake continued, his conviction silencing every whisper in the packed auditorium. This is organized crime using institutional manipulation to steal generational family property through systematic terror campaigns. The crowd's energy shifted like an earthquake. Confusion transformed into white-hot rage as 400 people simultaneously realized they'd been manipulated, lied to, and weaponized by criminals who'd stolen their money while using them as unwitting accomplices. Sarah Williams, the investigative reporter, delivered the killing blow. Sheriff Mitchell, are you stating that this entire emergency session was organized by criminals to legitimize property theft? I'm stating that Vivian Cromwell and her criminal associates are under active federal investigation for organized fraud, conspiracy, theft, impersonation of peace officers, filing hundreds of false government reports, and attempting to steal private property through criminal enterprise, Jake replied with absolute finality. The auditorium exploded into chaos. Residents shouted demands for arrests. Media crews stampeded toward the stage, and Vivian stood frozen as her criminal empire collapsed in real time before hundreds of witnesses and live television coverage. That's when I stood and walked to the microphone. The crowd quieted instantly. Every eye focused on the man they'd been told was a terrorist, but who clearly was just an exhausted rancher defending his family's legacy. You know what I learned fighting this war? I said, voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Bullies. Count on good people being too tired, too scared, or too broke to fight back. But when they threaten your children's inheritance and turn your neighbors into weapons with lies and fear, you document every crime, preserve every threat, and trust that truth will always defeat organized evil. The applause started like distant thunder, then built into a roar that shook the building as 400 people realized they'd witnessed justice destroying tyranny. Commissioner Bradley's voice cracked. All complaints against Mitchell Ranch are dismissed. Federal prosecutors will handle criminal charges immediately. Behind us, handcuffs clicked as Vivian's reign of terror finally ended. 6 months later, justice tasted sweeter than my grandmother's peach cobbler. Vivian faced 23 felony charges, including organized fraud, theft, impersonation, and conspiracy. Her 3-week trial ended with a 15-year prison sentence, plus $2 million restitution. Buck Hargrove and his fake enforcement clowns got 18 months each for impersonation and property destruction. The civil lawsuit delivered Texas-sized satisfaction. Our class action representing 47 defrauded families resulted in $8 million judgment against Vivian's criminal empire. Every stolen penny recovered, plus punitive damages that sent crystal-clear warnings to other wannabe property thieves statewide. Sage Creek Estates elected entirely new leadership with Tom Bradley, the retired firefighter who'd supported me as president. Their first act eliminated all harassment policies and phantom security contracts. Monthly HOA fees dropped 60% once. They removed Vivian's fraudulent vendor billing and imaginary services. My ranch business exploded beyond wildest dreams. Media coverage transformed me into a folk hero for family farmers fighting corporate predators. Orders increased 400% from customers nationwide wanting to support ranchers defending generational land. I hired 3 additional hands and expanded operations to meet overwhelming demand. The personal healing meant everything. My children now beam with pride telling classmates about their dad's ranch, regularly bringing friends for educational tours. My ex-wife publicly apologized for doubting me, admitting sophisticated psychological manipulation had fooled even protective mothers. Family barbecues feel genuine again. Jake and I rebuilt our relationship stronger than steel. Fighting organized crime together reminded us that family bonds transcend petty disagreements about inheritance disputes we couldn't even remember clearly. We meet monthly for bourbon and brotherhood, planning community protection strategies. The legal precedent became nationwide model. Marcus's expanded law firm now handles 127 similar cases across 5 states using our documentation methods to protect families from harassment campaigns. Other victims regularly call seeking advice about defeating HOA fraud through systematic evidence gathering. Millbrook County passed the Property Owner Protection Ordinance requiring verification before processing HOA complaints. Criminal penalties now apply for filing false reports, plus mandatory audits for organizations claiming authority over non-member properties. Similar legislation spread across Texas after legislators viewed our video evidence. The State Rural Heritage Protection Act passed unanimously, limiting HOA authority over agricultural operations while creating serious criminal penalties for organized harassment of farming families. Our case study proved that systematic documentation defeats even sophisticated criminal enterprises. But my proudest achievement remains the Rural Heritage Scholarship Fund established with settlement money. We've awarded $240,000 helping 63 farm kids attend college while preserving agricultural knowledge. Recipients study veterinary medicine, sustainable farming, and rural law, ensuring future generations can defend family land. Conservation efforts exceeded expectations. Settlement funds purchased adjacent 35 acres Vivian had targeted for development, permanently protecting 82 acres of family ranch for my grandchildren. The expanded operation supports wildlife habitat restoration and educational programs teaching Sustainable agriculture. Former enemies became genuine friends. Multiple Sage Creek families buy beef directly from my ranch, supporting local agriculture while getting superior meat. Mrs. Morgan, terrorized during Vivian's staged incident, became my best customer and brings grandchildren for ranch education tours monthly. Local schools integrated our story into civics' curriculum, teaching property rights, legal research, and community organizing. Students learn how ordinary citizens document criminal activity and use legal systems protecting families from organized predators. Every October, Heritage Day's celebration brings 2,500 visitors to the ranch for education, entertainment, and community healing. Families enjoy hay rides, learn about agriculture, meet law enforcement heroes, and celebrate justice defeating organized crime through citizen determination. Standing on my porch last weekend, watching my cattle graze peacefully while children from Sage Creek played with ranch dogs, I reflected on this incredible journey. The evening air carried familiar scents of hay and barbecue, while laughter echoed across land my grandfather would be proud to see thriving. 5 years ago, I thought I was just defending my ranch, I told festival visitors. Turns out we were protecting every family's right to live peacefully without being terrorized by criminals with fake authority and clipboard intimidation. The lesson is still straightforward. Confirm HOA authority by county records. Document all from initial contact. And remember that bullies prevail as long as good people are too tired to resist. Truth and tenacity always beat orchestrated dishonesty. Post your HOA horror stories in the comments. If you're still battling harassment or wish to warn others of red flags, your story could save another family from decades of criminal targeting. If you watched Justice Served with Texas-sized fulfillment, subscribe to HOA Stories for more stories of everyday heroes who didn't take backing down when predators came knocking. Another week, fake parking authority attempted to church cars. Good thing pastor was once federal prosecutor. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If you laughed or rolled your head at HOA crazy from this episode, give this a like and leave your comment below. We release HOA Karen mayhem and neighborhood battles every week, so subscribe to catch the next ridiculous tale.